Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to BookTrek 2021. This is a BookTube 5-month mission that I'm embarked on with a bunch of other great BookTubers. I don't list them anymore on these videos because the videos are piling up, mostly mine. But I list the hashtag for BookTrek 2021 so that you can follow along with and make sure you don't miss any of the videos. It's tremendous amounts of fun. There could be more Voxer conversations for my liking than there are. But I love talking on the Voxer. I just love it. It's the perfect thing to break up a day, you know? Well, you don't. You probably don't know because you probably have real-world things to break up your day. Relationships, school, work, basic personal hygiene. I don't have any of those things. I finish reading for the night. I take the bean on a quick morning walk so that she can do her business. She doesn't like being awake in the morning. She likes to loll until around noon. She's not a morning person, my little girl, and she's also not a country person. She likes the bustle of the city. She much prefers a sidewalk with people on it to the countryside with chipmunks in it. We go on a little walk, then we come back. I clean her up. I put food and water out for her in case she's interested in it. She never is that early, but I don't want to maybe miss that she's interested in it and have her not have any. So I put that out, and then I settle on my little work couch here for a whole day. It'll be interspersed with whatever she needs. If she wants to go outside for 15 minutes, half an hour, we go. No arguments, no ifs, ands, or buts, no just wait a minute, no nothing like that. She only ever requests that. Everything else she's perfect with. But when I'm on the computer all day, I am reading, I am doing email, I am writing, I am researching, and Voxer is a wonderful way to break that up. But anyway, we are doing a franchise a month for BookTrek 2021, and I can't speak for my co-host, but I am having so much fun that I'm already dreaming about BookTrek 2022. I mean, if we were to do it the same time period, so August through the end of 2022, if we were to do the same time period, we could easily do 5 completely different categories that we're doing. The categories that we're doing in 2021 are the original 5 franchises of Star Trek. So August is Star Trek the original series, then The Next Generation, then Deep Space Nine, then Voyager, then Enterprise. In 2022, we could easily do Star Trek Discovery, God help us all, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek spin-off stuff. So Star Trek, these are novels that we're reading, but there are Star Trek spin-off novels that aren't grounded in any of the original tentpole franchises. There are plenty of them, and plenty of different series for them. Star Trek and other media. There'll probably be a new Star Trek series on cable by the time we get to 2022's event. I'm hoping that it continues over. In the meantime, for 2021, I am abusing the privilege because I am, when in the BookTube world, I am a bit of a freak. I like to make lots of videos. I can talk nonstop about books with you people, absolutely nonstop. And when it comes to the original Star Trek, this is a fictional world, a fictional universe, characters and continuities that I have known for 50 years and been personally invested in for 50 years. So it would be easy to do. I'm not sure that the frequency of videos will be the same for Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm thinking that it will probably go down, but it could go up. It could, because Star Trek The Next Generation is largely fresher ground for me than any other franchise, except the modern ones. The Kurtzman ones are fairly fresh to me because so much of what I've seen from them has been so flagrantly not Star Trek. Whether it's good or bad, just flagrantly not Star Trek. But for the original series, I set a rule for myself at the beginning that I wouldn't go to authors that I really love or books that I really love. I would avoid those for now and go revisit books that I read only once, that I read quickly, that I barely remember. And that's what I'm doing today. But I can't help but notice my choices in BookTrek 2021 for the Star Trek the original series are starting to shade towards the end of the original series, which is not the end of the 3rd season of Star Trek on TV before it got canceled. It's the end of the lives of that main cast as a crew together, as a body of adventurers together. I'm starting to skew a little bit late in that timeline, and I wonder if that's just me, my mind, preparing itself for the next generation, preparing to make the leap of 70 years to the next generation. It could be. We are certainly dealing with that today. This is Star Trek number 97. I believe this is one of the last Star Trek novels that was numbered. For a long time, for years and years and years, the Star Trek novels were numbered up in the right-hand corner. And I guess that was to encourage collectors, because they're certainly not in any kind of series. They jump all around in time, the kind of thing we've been talking about in these videos. Time entered into the original series, so suddenly you could have a novel about Captain Kirk in the first year of his command of Starship Enterprise, and next month you could have a novel about Captain Kirk in the last month of his command of Starship Enterprise A. That range, thanks to the longevity of the show and then the movies, that range was suddenly possible. And it's a totally different, these are totally different characters, totally different scenarios and settings, to lots and lots of extra different backstory. And Star Trek, the original series novels, went on after this one. This is In the Name of Honor by Dayton Ward. They went on after this one, and they still continue, but I don't think they were numbered after this. I don't think the Star Trek novels got to 100 in number. I think I would have remembered that if I'd seen one that was number 100. This is, in many ways, a classic throwback of a thing. It has, for instance, as you can see, beautiful original cover artwork. So many of these things don't. So many of them don't. Even if they do have original cover artwork, it's not beautiful. It's just somebody doing some sort of computer overlay of photos of the cast. And a lot of times, that's not even done well. Well, feel free to Google the novel by Margaret Wander Bonanno, who's really, really good. As a novelist, she's really, really good. And even the book is really, really good. But Google the cover of a novel called Probe, and you'll see what I mean. This is frameable. That's just lovely. A Klingon bird of prey just firing away. With the confidence not to show us anything else. It doesn't have, a badly composed original Trek cover would have maybe that painting, and then it would be marred by a studio still of the head of Jim Kirk or the head of Mr. Spock, looking concerned, looking in opposite directions. Here, nothing like that. And part of it is driven by the plot of the book, which takes place after Star Trek V, but before Star Trek VI. So we are talking about an older Jim Kirk. We're talking about an older crew. We're talking about Sulu as a captain on his own. We're talking about also a very marked change in tone that a lot of fans noticed right away when Star Trek VI came out. If we're talking about the movies here, keep in mind I'm still trying, behind the scenes, to organize a live discussion, a Zoom discussion of the movies. It's amazing how little ancillary stuff we're doing for this big event. Maybe that will pick up when people's schedules clear. I don't have a schedule to clear, so naturally I'm kvetching about it. But in Star Trek V, those of you you may be lightly familiar with the movies or distantly remember them, Star Trek V was a vanity project. It was directed by William Shatner, and he had a large say in what was going to happen. And as such, is largely detested by fans who almost want to say it's not continuity, that it didn't really happen. None of the events in it really happened. Not only because of some of the weird ideas involved, Jim Kirk's meets God, but also because of violation of that big studio Bible that we've talked about many, many times during the course of August. There's a big sort of show Bible that new writers to Star Trek, and I believe Dayton Ward is completely new. I think he won a contest to write this book. I think this is his first novel of any kind. That Bible was imposed on writers. They had to follow it. And one of the rules in that Bible is no new relatives. You can't give Kirk a sister that he's never had before. And Star Trek V, the movie, violates that. It gives Spock a brother. Well, that's impossible. I happen to know you don't have a brother. That is true. I have a half-brother. Sybok is the Vulcan in Star Trek V, who was the son of Sarek by a different mother, by a Vulcan princess, we're told. Before Sarek started hanging out with the Earth woman named Amanda Grayson, who was the mother of Spock. So, if we adapt the continuity to say that Star Trek V is in continuity, then Sarek went through Ponfar with a Vulcan woman and married a Vulcan woman and had a full Vulcan child. And oddly enough, if that's true, there's a great story to be told. If that's true, there's a great novel to be written about Sybok that has, as far as I know, never been written. Because in the movie Star Trek V, we learn that Sybok has embraced his emotions. So he's a Vulcan, but he's not logical. He's passionate. Some might even say insanely passionate. And that is a fascinating story. Spock alludes to it in the movie, tells Kirk and McCoy that Sybok's emotional beliefs made him a bit of an outcast on Vulcan, necessarily, you would think, and that he left the planet, never to return. It makes for a fascinating dynamic, because Spock has been struggling with emotions his whole life, and we are told in Journey to Babel that his mother relates that he was taunted for his emotions, his human half, by his Vulcan children. And a reality that is conveyed in the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie, where we actually see that moment. There aren't many moments in the J.J. in the Kelvin verse. There aren't many moments that I like. That's one of them. So here we have a Spock who grows up struggling with his emotions, wanting to be all the more Vulcan, wanting to be as Vulcan as he can, embracing the way of life. Is it possible that he embraced that way of life despite being half human because of Sybok? How well did he know his brother? Is a question that Star Trek V doesn't even raise, much less answer. And nothing else, as those of you know who watch the movie. Sybok doesn't live through the movie. So he's not an ongoing character. So we don't get to resolve these questions, and I don't think any fiction ever has. But in that movie, I do not share the vilification of Star Trek V. I think it's delightful. Especially, epically, the opening sequence and the closing sequence. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy in Yosemite. That opening and closing sequence, the bracket of that movie is, as Gene Roddenberry said it, pure character. And I think it works perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. There are plenty of other things that work perfectly there, too. The fact that the Spock that we get is incredibly stern, but he is not without emotion. He has very strong emotions. They are just ruthlessly under his own control. He's aged and grown and developed past needing to be all about Surak and logic all the time. To the point where, at the climactic moment, he can say to a soused old Klingon general, "Damn you, sir, you will try." That's a great line. And also, it's immediately followed up by one of the best punchlines in any Star Trek movie, where Kirk thinks he's the prisoner of the Klingons, and he encounters Spock on the bridge of the Klingon ship. Spock is in complete control of the situation, and Kirk's overcome with emotion and says, "Spock," and he moves towards him, seemingly to embrace him out of sheer joy at finding him alive and at being alive himself. And Spock's Leonard Nimoy gives it the perfect pacing. Says, "Please, Captain, not in front of the Klingons." but anyway, at the end of that movie, we seem to be in a radically altered geopolitical state. The Romulans, the Klingons, and the Federation seem like they're mostly friends. They're dining together at the end of the movie. And Kirk is okay with that, even though in earlier movies, the Klingons killed his son, David, whiny pants, pouty face. They killed him. A Klingon knives him just offhandedly while Kirk is listening. And in earlier movies, that gives us the idea that maybe Kirk is extra embittered towards the Klingons. But at the end of Star Trek V, that seems to be gone. He seems to be perfectly okay with it. But, as fans noted right away, at the beginning of Star Trek VI, he hates the Klingons. Hates them to the point of being willing to countenance genocide. Don't trust them. I've never forgiven them for the death of my boy. That is not the Jim Kirk that we see at the end of Star Trek V. So something happens in between Star Trek V and Star Trek VI. And, people who don't understand continuity or geekery or Star Trek will say, yeah, the director changed. But no, that's not good enough. There has to be a reason, and the reason is given. A reason is given in this book. Why Kirk would be so different from one movie to the next. In fact, a great deal of this book is intended to set up Star Trek VI, Undiscovered Country. A great deal of this book is sort of foregrounding the kinds of characters and situations and even specific quotes that we will get in that last movie. And as such, this is purely for fans. This novel is purely for fans, although I have to say it's fairly well done. At the heart of the story is a starship crew medical ship crew, I think, called the Gargarin, who are taken prisoner by the Klingons and held as prisoners of war in a brutal camp on a distant planet. And it's largely unknown. It's certainly unknown to the Federation or the Klingons at large, but it's largely unknown even to Federation staff until Kirk learns about it and wants to effect a rescue mission, wants to get those POWs out of what looks like perpetual imprisonment. The crew, the POW crew, is very, very well done, including Stephen Garovic, the son of Kirk's old captain, but also other characters as well who date and board events for the book. And there's also lots of diplomacy going on between the Federation and the Klingons. In fact, Chancellor, oh my God, I want to say Gowron, but it's not Gowron. Gorkon. Chancellor Gorkon from Star Trek VI, played by David Warner, the great David Warner. He appears in this book, but he's just a counselor. He's not the head of the Klingon government yet. But he is still idealistic. At one point in the book, Spock says he sounds like someone I'd like to meet. And of course, in Star Trek VI, they've known each other for a while via communications. They've never met in person until they meet in that movie when Gorkon says "face to face at last." It's things like that. It's echoes like that are fleshed out in this book. Sort of, this book is the sounds, provides you with the original sounds that then go on to echo in Star Trek VI. So you can see already that POW plot notwithstanding, if you don't know the movies, you're not going to get much out of this. There's an adventure story, too, in fact, at the heart of the book, that are well done. Maybe that would carry you along, but I don't think so. Once again, we have to rely on what we've said all along here in BookTrek 2021, which is that, presumably, understandably, Star Trek fiction is written for Star Trek fans. I guess that's why it has such a despised and condescended to nature among other kinds of science fiction. Because if you're not a Star Trek fan, there's very little Star Trek fiction that you will like, or that you will get. The emotional payoffs, in other words, happen in a different genre, in a different kind of art, off stage. There are emotional payoffs in here. But I thought a little too much of the book's time. I mean, a lot of it is meant to foreground Star Trek VI, Star Trek VI is a weird movie. People always say Star Trek V, because of Shatner, was a weird Star Trek movie. I would argue that there's no movie in any franchise that is weirder than Star Trek VI. Star Trek VI is unbelievably dark in a lot of ways, and also unbelievably strange in a lot of ways. Not just attributable to ineptitude. There's quite a bit of ineptitude in the storytelling of Star Trek VI. But even if you smooth that out, it's still a strange movie. In a way, it almost acts like no other Star Trek movies or shows have ever existed. Which is kind of odd. What I wouldn't give to be able to snap my fingers or engage with a Star Trek transporter and have all of my co-hosts here at Hyde Cottage, and we could do a live watching of Star Trek VI, so that we have the movie playing a little box in the bottom of the screen, and you have all of us watching and reacting in live time. How much fun would that be? Oh my, how much fun would that be? I don't think it's possible. I don't think it'd be possible even if I could get everybody here. I don't think we'd have the rights to show the movie. Either way, someday I will watch the movie in real life with someone other than Mark Richardson. Someday that will happen, and what fun that will be. What was the point I was going to make? Oh, yes. A lot of this book is grounding Star Trek VI and differentiating Star Trek VI from Star Trek V. But there's also a large part of this that is taken up with the fact that Klingons look different from the movies to the TV show. Right? If you were following along as a Star Trek fan, then you watched the original first 3 seasons of Star Trek, then you watched the animated series, maybe you read some fan fiction. And in those, Klingons all looked the same. They wore black and gold, they had military sashes, but physically, they were black-skinned, the males tended to have goatees, they had sort of a swarthy, coppery tone to their skin, their eyebrows tended to be furry and sometimes bifurcated, but otherwise human looking. And then all of a sudden Star Trek the Motion Picture happened and the Klingons looked very different. They had fangs and gigantic cranial ridges all over their heads. And that just kept going. Once that was introduced in Star Trek the Motion Picture, once that was introduced by Gene Roddenberry, the great bird of the galaxy himself, that was suddenly canon. So those were Klingons. But they weren't our Klingons. They weren't what Klingons looked like before, and fans were immediately presented with what to do about that. And for a long time, for probably, well, until Star Trek Enterprise actually took it upon itself to introduce a canonical explanation. Until that, so that's what, 30 years? For 30 years, the standard fan explanation for that was that the Klingon Empire encompasses many species. And some have the knobby heads, and some don't. And that's all there is to it. Just like the Federation encompasses many species. It doesn't need any more explanation than that. Then we get to a Deep Space Nine episode, Trials and Tribulations. And we have Lieutenant Worf. And thanks to the unbelievable special effects of that episode, talk about something I'd like to watch live with my co-host. Our crew, some of our crew members are back on a space station, the space station of the Trouble with Tribbles from the original Star Trek. Our characters are digitally spliced in with old footage from that original episode. And that footage includes a fight between the Enterprise crew and a Klingon crew. They're both on shore leave. They are supposed to be on their best behavior. But a Klingon officer starts to taunt the Enterprise crew. And Scotty, who is in charge of the delegation in this bar, says, well, we're grown men. We can take a few insults. Sit down. That's an order. He's just trying to bait you. That's all. And then the Klingon starts to insult the Enterprise. When he calls Jim Kirk a swaggering, tin-plated delusion, Danubian slime devil, well, we're weak. We're big enough to take a few insults. But when the Klingon insults the Enterprise, then tempers start to flare. And Scotty actually says, laddie, would you care to rephrase that? And the Klingon does. He says, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say the Enterprise should be hauling garbage. I meant to say the Enterprise should be hauled away as garbage. That's all it takes. Then there's a gigantic Donnybrook. And before that happens, our inserted Deep Space Nine characters are at the table with Worf, the Klingon from Star Trek The Next Generation, who's... And he says, well, the barmaid says, well, you know, those Klingons over in the corner keep ordering Broctogino or blood wine or whatever, and our crew has no idea what she's talking about. What do you mean? There are no Klingons here except disguised Mr. Worf. They turn to Worf right away. And he says, yes, those are Klingons, and we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it with outsiders. That's the most we get, until Star Trek Enterprise gives us a very convoluted, but nevertheless now canonical explanation for why that happens. And even that canonical explanation is blown out of the water by Deep Space Nine itself. In Deep Space Nine itself, it would be one thing if you introduced that explanation. Okay, there's a convoluted explanation for why some Klingons don't have the bony ridges on their heads. There's a convoluted explanation for why, and that's just going to be it, and, you know, you like it or leave it, that's what the canonical explanation is. But then Star Trek Deep Space Nine introduces the three Klingon commanders who are named in the original series, Kor, Koloth, and Kang, played by the same actors. It is an absolutely fantastic Deep Space Nine episode. Absolutely fantastic. But Kor, Kang, and Koloth have head ridges. So there goes the Star Trek Enterprise retcon of all this. There goes right out the aft porthole. Because if you can explain why those original Klingons that we met, Kor, Koloth, and Kang, don't have those head ridges, and then you bring them back on screen and they have them, that also happens in Voyager. There's a great moment in a great episode of Star Trek Voyager where we actually see Captain Kang. And he's older, and he has the head ridges. However you want to parse it, this novel also, Dayton Ward spends time here. He gives an explanation of his own that explains the difference in appearance between the original series Klingons and all other Klingons. He gives an explanation here. I kind of like it. I kind of think that it's very interesting. I could see it. being logical. I could see it working as a story element. I'm pretty sure, some of you could check me on this, but I'm pretty sure this book came out before the canonical explanation on Star Trek Enterprise. You couldn't do it now, because anything that shows up on screen, whether it's on the movies or on the small screen, is now canon. It goes into that book, and writers cannot deviate from it anymore. So no one could write this explanation again. I'm pretty sure this probably came out before that explanation was given. I don't see how it could come out afterwards. But it's me going back to numbered Star Trek fiction. I've been trying to come up with newer things, I've been wanting to stick with later Star Trek fiction, and I've been wanting to come up with variations on a theme, and I keep going back to these numbered novels. And August doesn't have many days left in it, so I think I might stick around in the elder days of Star Trek, the original series, as a way to sort of psychologically prepare myself for moving to the next generation next month. I don't actually know 100% because one of my nightly rituals in August has been to sort of flash through the rows and rows of Star Trek ebooks that I have and sort of plunk down on one, more or less at random unless the choice doesn't work. So I might do that tonight, or I might not. Are there other old crew episodes? Old crew novels that I might want to read? Probably quite a few. Probably quite a few that I haven't read in quite some time. One of my favorite of them is actually a Next Generation novel, and since it's one that I've gone back to many, many times and that I love, I'm not going to revisit it in September. But there might be others that I don't know about. Either way, another alternative that might work is for you to pick a Star Trek novel that you want me to read. Feel free in the comments field. The original series, and something that's not a favorite of mine. Feel free to pick one. Be happy to read it and talk about it in the waning days of August. And then we move on to the Next Generation. Jean-Luc Picard and endless board meetings. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you.